Kevin Costner was sitting in his Malibu office when the phone call that would define his character came through. On the other end was Steven Spielberg with an offer that could have made Costner the highest paid actor in Hollywood history. But what Costner said next shocked everyone in the room and changed Whitney Houston's life forever. It was March 1995, 3 years after The Bodyguard had made both Kevin and Whitney global superstars. The film had earned over $400 million worldwide, and Whitney's rendition of I Will Always Love You had become the best-selling single by a female artist in music history. But behind the glittering success, Whitney was fighting a battle that few people understood. Hollywood had a problem with Whitney Houston, and it wasn't her voice. While The Bodyguard's success should have opened doors for Whitney in Hollywood, the opposite was happening. Studio executives whispered that she was difficult to work with and not actress material. The real reason was something far more insidious. A black woman had just proven she could carry a major motion picture, and that made certain people very uncomfortable. Whitney's agent, Nicole David, had been making rounds to every major studio in town for over a year. Whitney wants to do more films, Nicole explained to executives over and over again. She's proven she can act. She's proven she can draw audiences. But door after door slammed shut. Projects that seemed perfect for Whitney mysteriously went to other actresses. Scripts that had been written with her in mind suddenly became not quite right. At Warner Brothers, they suggested a musical where Whitney would play a gospel singer. At Universal, they offered a romantic comedy where she'd be a lounge performer. Every studio wanted to keep her locked in musical roles, as if her dramatic performance in The Bodyguard had never happened. They see me as just a singer who got lucky once, Whitney confided to Kevin during one of their phone calls. Like The Bodyguard was some kind of accident. The most heartbreaking rejection came when Whitney lost a role she had been perfect for, a biographical film about Ella Fitzgerald. Whitney had grown up listening to Ella's music, had studied her vocal techniques, and possessed both the vocal ability and dramatic range to bring the jazz legend to life on screen. She had even met Ella personally at a jazz festival in 1989. They went with someone else, Nicole had to tell Whitney after weeks of negotiations. Who? A white actress. They're going to dub her voice. Whitney had been silent for a long time after hearing that news. The idea that Hollywood would rather cast a white actress and fake the singing than hire Whitney Houston, who could actually sing like Ella Fitzgerald, was almost too absurd to be believed. Meanwhile, Kevin Costner was Hollywood's golden boy. Fresh off his Oscar win for Dances with Wolves and the massive success of The Bodyguard, every studio in town wanted him. Directors lined up to work with him. Producers offered blank checks. Kevin could have his pick of any project in Hollywood. That's when Spielberg called with the offer of a lifetime. Kevin, I'm putting together the biggest war epic since Saving Private Ryan, Spielberg explained during their meeting at Amblin Entertainment. It's called The Last Battalion, and I want you to lead it. We're talking $25 million up front, plus 20% of the gross. This could be your apocalypse now. The script was incredible. The role was tailor-made for Costner. The supporting cast was already filling up with A-list names. Tom Hanks was interested. Meryl Streep was reading the female lead. This was the kind of prestige project that defined careers and won Academy Awards. But Kevin had one question that caught Spielberg off guard. Steven, what about the female lead? Is Whitney being considered? Spielberg shifted uncomfortably in his chair, setting down his coffee cup. Kevin, this is a serious dramatic piece. Whitney's talented, but she's primarily known as a singer. We need someone with more acting experience. She carried The Bodyguard, Kevin replied quietly, his tone measured but firm. That was different. That was more of a musical romantic thriller. This requires serious dramatic chops. We're talking about a woman dealing with her husband's wartime deployment, managing anti-Japanese sentiment in her community. Kevin leaned forward. Steven, Whitney handled complex emotional material in The Bodyguard. She played a woman dealing with fame, fear, family pressure, and a complicated romantic relationship while her life was being threatened. I understand your loyalty, Kevin, but this is different. The Bodyguard was entertainment. This is art. This is history. The words hung in the air between them. Kevin stared at Spielberg, processing what he'd just heard. Kevin stared out the window of Spielberg's office, watching the palm trees sway in the Santa Monica breeze. He was thinking about something Whitney had told him during their last phone conversation just 2 weeks earlier. Kevin, I feel like I proved something with the Bodyguard, you know? I showed I could act. I showed I could carry a film. But now it's like none of that mattered. Like I have to prove myself all over again, except this time nobody's even giving me the chance. Her voice had been smaller than usual, more vulnerable. This was the same woman who could command a stadium of 50,000 people with her voice, reduced to asking for basic opportunities that lesser talents were being handed freely. Sometimes I wonder if they're right, Whitney had continued. Maybe I was just playing myself. Maybe I don't have real acting ability. Kevin had felt his heart break a little. Whitney, that's not true. I was there for every take, every scene. What you brought to that character came from somewhere deep inside you. Then why won't anyone hire me? I'm starting to think the Bodyguard was a fluke. It was a conversation that had haunted Kevin for weeks. I'll read the script and get back to you, Kevin told Spielberg. That night, Kevin called Whitney. She was in her New Jersey home, the same house where she'd grown up singing in the New Hope Baptist Church choir with her mother, Sissy. Hey, Kevin, Whitney answered, and he could hear the tiredness in her voice. Whit, I need to ask you something. If you could do any movie right now, any role, what would it be? Whitney was quiet for a moment. I want to do something serious, Kevin. Something that shows I'm not just the girl who sings ballads. I want to show range, you know? I want to prove that the Bodyguard wasn't a fluke. What if I told you there might be something coming up? Kevin, don't. Please don't get my hopes up unless you're sure. I can't take another disappointment. The pain in her voice hit Kevin like a physical blow. This was Whitney Houston, one of the most talented performers of her generation, begging not to be given false hope about her own career. Kevin made his decision that night. The next morning, he called Spielberg back. Steven, I need Whitney to be considered for Meryl's role. There was a long pause. Kevin, I told you yesterday, this isn't right for her. Then I'm not right for the male lead. Another pause, longer this time. Kevin, let's not be hasty here. This is a $150 million picture. This is your chance to work with me again. Don't throw this away over this. Over what, Steven? You know what I mean. And Kevin did know. He knew exactly what Spielberg meant, and it made his stomach turn. I'm not throwing anything away, Kevin said calmly. I'm making a choice. Whitney Houston is one of the most talented performers I've ever worked with. If she's not good enough for your film, then neither am I. Kevin, be reasonable. I'll make sure Whitney gets looked at for other projects. But this one needs established dramatic actors. Whitney is established. The Bodyguard proved that. The Bodyguard was different, and you know it. How was it different, Steven? The silence stretched between them. Both men knew exactly how it was different, but only one was willing to acknowledge it. I'm withdrawing from the last battalion, Kevin said finally, and I want Whitney to know it's because she wasn't given fair consideration. Kevin, you're making a $25 million mistake. No, Steven, I'm making a statement. Kevin hung up the phone and immediately called Whitney. Whit, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. Okay, Whitney said, concern creeping into her voice. Spielberg offered me a huge film, the biggest payday of my career. I turned it down because they wouldn't seriously consider you for the female lead. Whitney was silent for so long that Kevin wondered if the call had dropped. Whitney, you there? Kevin, her voice was barely a whisper. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. The Bodyguard worked because we worked together. Your talent elevated my performance, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve either of us. Whitney started crying on the other end of the phone. Not the quiet, delicate tears of a movie scene, but the raw, grateful sobs of someone who had been fighting alone for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone in her corner. I can't believe you did that for me, she managed between tears. I didn't do it for you, Whit. I did it because it was right. But Kevin's decision came with consequences he hadn't anticipated. Within 48 hours, the story leaked to the trades. Costner walks away from Spielberg epic, read the headline in Variety. The article painted Kevin as difficult and suggested he was becoming too big for his own good. Anonymous industry sources questioned his judgment and his loyalty to Hollywood. Kevin's agent, Jim Burkus, was furious when he arrived at his Beverly Hills office the next morning. "Kevin, what the hell were you thinking? Do you know how many actors would kill for a Spielberg film? Do you know how many years it might be before he offers you another project?" "I know exactly what I've done, Jim." "No, you don't. You've painted a target on your back. Studios are going to think twice before working with an actor who walks away from prestige projects for personal reasons." Personal reasons? Jim, this was about fairness. This was about Whitney Houston, and everyone knows it. People are going to think you're romantically involved with her, or worse, that you've lost perspective on what's good for your career. Let them think what they want. Kevin, this isn't just about gossip. The Whisper campaign has already started. I've had 3 producers call me this morning asking if you become difficult to work with. Jim was right about the immediate consequences. Within hours, Kevin could feel the shift in how the industry viewed him. But Jim was right about the consequences. Over the next 6 months, Kevin noticed a subtle shift in how Hollywood treated him. Projects that should have come his way went to other actors. Meetings that should have been easy became complicated. The Whisper campaign was working. Meanwhile, Whitney was dealing with her own fallout. Some in the industry blamed her for Kevin's decision, as if she had somehow forced him to choose. "I never asked him to do that," Whitney told her manager, looking exhausted. "I never would have asked him to sacrifice his career for mine." "I know you didn't, Whitney, but that's not how some people are seeing it." The irony was crushing. Kevin's attempt to help Whitney's film career had actually made things worse for both of them. But then something unexpected happened. 6 months after the Spielberg incident, Kevin received a call from director Francis Ford Coppola. "Kevin, I heard what you did with the Spielberg project." "Francis, don't apologize. It was the most honorable thing I've seen in this town in 20 years. I'm putting together a project, and I want both you and Whitney for it." The project was a drama about jazz musicians in 1940s New Orleans. It wasn't a huge studio picture, but it was exactly the kind of serious, dramatic role Whitney had been craving. "Francis, I appreciate the offer, but I need to know, are you offering this to Whitney because she's talented, or because you feel sorry for the situation?" Coppola laughed. "Kevin, I've been wanting to work with Whitney since The Bodyguard. That woman has a depth that most actors spend years trying to develop. I'm offering this to both of you because you're the best people for the roles." When Kevin called Whitney with the news, her reaction was everything he'd hoped for. "Kevin, are you serious? Francis Ford Coppola wants both of us?" "He wants us, Whit. Not me with someone else. Not you as a consolation prize. He wants us." "I can't believe it. A real dramatic role, with a real director who believes in me." The film, called Basin Street Blues, never got the attention of a Spielberg blockbuster, but it did something more important for Whitney. It gave her the chance to prove her dramatic range in a role that had nothing to do with singing or being saved by a bodyguard. Whitney's performance earned her critical acclaim and several acting award nominations. More importantly, it opened doors that had been slammed shut. But the real victory came a year later, when Kevin ran into Spielberg at a Hollywood party. "Kevin," Spielberg approached him, looking somewhat sheepish. "I saw Whitney in the Coppola film. She was remarkable." "Yes, she was. I may have misjudged the situation back then." Kevin looked at the director, who had once offered him the role of a lifetime. "Steven, the situation was what it was. The important thing is that Whitney got to show what she could do. Would she be interested in reading for my next project?" Kevin smiled. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" The story of Kevin's sacrifice for Whitney became legendary in Hollywood, but not in the way either of them expected. Instead of being seen as career suicide, Kevin's decision became a defining moment that elevated his reputation. Directors and producers began to see him not just as a talented actor, but as someone with integrity who stood by his principles. For Whitney, the Coppola film opened doors that led to more serious dramatic roles. She never forgot what Kevin had risked for her, and their friendship deepened into something that transcended the entertainment industry. Years later, when Whitney faced her darkest struggles, Kevin was one of the few people in Hollywood who never turned his back on her. When others whispered about her problems, Kevin remained loyal. When opportunities dried up for Whitney, Kevin continued to advocate for her behind the scenes. At Whitney's funeral in 2012, Kevin's eulogy included these words: "Whitney, you were perfect. You were great. The Whitney I knew, despite her fame and fortune, was still wondering if she was good enough, pretty enough, smart enough. She had a gift, but she didn't think she was good enough to have it." But what Kevin didn't say publicly was something he'd told Whitney privately years earlier, after the Spielberg incident. "Whit, I didn't sacrifice my career for you. I protected my integrity, and you were worth protecting." Today, Kevin Costner continues to be one of Hollywood's most respected actors. But those who know the real story understand that his greatest performance wasn't in any movie. It was the moment he chose friendship and principle over fame and fortune. The Last Battalion was eventually made with different leads and became a modest success. But it was quickly forgotten, while the story of Kevin Costner's loyalty to Whitney Houston became the stuff of Hollywood legend. Sometimes the roles we don't take define us more than the ones we do. Kevin Costner could have been $25 million richer, but instead, he became something more valuable, a man who stood up for what was right when it mattered most. And Whitney Houston got something more precious than any movie role: proof that someone believed in her talent enough to risk everything for it. That phone call from Spielberg could have changed Kevin Costner's bank account. Instead, it revealed his character, and in doing so, changed how Hollywood history would remember both him and Whitney Houston. This incredible story makes us wonder, what would you have done in Kevin's position? Would you have walked away from $25 million to stand up for a friend? Have you ever witnessed someone sacrifice their own success to help another person achieve their dreams? Kevin Costner's decision reminds us that true friendship means more than any paycheck, and sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is use our privilege to lift others up. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of loyalty, and let us know in the comments. Who in your life would you make this sacrifice for? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of Hollywood courage and hit that notification bell.